We should be online right now, and it's a great privilege and honor for me to welcome our guest today, Dr. Ilana Zilber-Rosenberg and Professor Eugene Rosenberg. I'll explain that we do have a connection. I'll explain that in a moment. And usually I am the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. But today we're going to play grown-ups, and I'm hosting a book for grown-ups, a wonderful book entitled "Where Did We Come From? The Origin and Evolution of Life" by Eugene and Ilana. May I call you Eugene and Ilana because otherwise it's going to get very difficult.
Absolutely.
And welcome to this show. I have a lot of questions. I'll just start out by maybe full disclosure that Eugene, I was your PhD student. Some people think that I changed my last name. I didn't. It was always Rosenberg. But Ilana, you were Eugene's PhD student before me, and you did change your last name. You married Eugene.
Slightly.
And you have a union, not only a marriage, but also a scientific collaboration that goes back decades. And now we see it in the book. Eugene, you always told me to think big, do science about big things. Where did we come from? That's a big thing. So where did this book come
from? I give a course on the microbiome, and that's part of the reason. The other is Ilana and I have discussed it for a long time, these questions, and we thought it would be useful to put it into a book. We got married late in life, so this is our baby.
This is your baby. Oh, well, I'm so happy to be introducing it to our viewers and listeners. So, Ilana, how long did it take for this book to reach fruition, from the idea phase to starting to write it to actually publishing it?
I think about 3 years.
So that's a late baby.
Yeah, it's a late baby, but it's a result of, Eugene said it's our baby. Our first baby is the whole genome concept.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So who wants to introduce the book and talk about it? And don't fight.
No, we won't, because Eugene likes to do introductions, and I like to add and to.
So we'll start out. The book discusses two of the most important questions in biology: the origin of life and the evolution of life. And during the last 20 years or so, there have been major changes in understanding both of these phenomena. We still don't understand the origin of life. We have working hypotheses, but we don't understand. The evolution of life is constantly evolving, changing our understanding of it. From the beginning of the work of Charles Darwin and Wallace till today, it's been constantly changing, especially in the last 20 years with the new developments in biology, which shows that all animals and plants are not individuals, but are a complex system of the host and many symbiotic microorganisms. So that changes fundamentally how we look. We're no longer individuals. We're a complex system.
Okay, that sounds like a line from a movie by Monty Python. So as individuals, I mean, when we were kids, we learned that we get approximately half our DNA from our mom and half our DNA from our dad. But essentially, we get most of our DNA from our mom because we inherit the microorganisms. Yeah. So Ilana, a few words about that. How much DNA is ours and how much is bacteria or other creatures?
I think we have about 100 times more DNA than as adults than the by microbes than our DNA.
100 times more information.
Yeah.
It's about the same amount, but because there's so many different kinds of bacteria, the information is more than 100 times as much.
Okay, so essentially, you might argue that we're 1% mom and dad and 99% the bacteria that are hand-me-downs.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah, but I have my reservations about such a description, I would say,
Go ahead.
because our DNA, our own DNA, not the microbes, determine actually a lot about our physiology and our life expectancy and so on. The bacteria add on to that. They participate, they change things, but they are not the main determinants of our being. Eugene may not agree with me because he loves his bacteria, but I think that the main determinants of our physiology is our own DNA.
One way to look at it is that the microbes are an insurance policy. They have so many different kinds of bacteria that if the environment changes and the host DNA, our DNA, cannot manage, then the microbes come in and solve the problem for us. So they're there as a when changes occur, they allow us to adapt and evolve.
It is true, I think, for more simple organisms, but for complex organisms like the humans, it takes a long time for a microbe to change something or to help to adapt. In simple organisms, it can really be make a difference. The microbes, an additional microbe, an additional gene that comes from a new microbe can make an enormous difference.
In teeth studies, we often inherit our mother's bacteria for life. But a lot of the growth and success of bacteria in our body, on our body, depends on environmental factors, right? What we eat and how we bathe ourselves and how we brush our teeth and so on. And the point that I think that you're trying to make is that this flux, this changing in our bacterial culture, if you will, affects our evolution. So it's not only Darwin, it's a kind of, you're evoking a kind of neo-Lamarckism, where people during their lives can actually change their DNA, which is like an oy vey thing, according to the original Darwin-Wallace theory.
Not only they change the bacteria, but they can now transmit this to the offspring. That's
how it becomes evolution.
Exactly. So this is a new concept. Now, one of the interesting things, I found the book really readable. I think it's wonderful for laymen. I would say 90% of the book is very easy for people to read, whether or not they have a background in science. There's one chapter that's a little daunting, but mostly the book is very, very accessible. And of course, it's dealing with the major questions. What are we doing here? So does science support the premise that we all started out from one single cell? All living things start out with one single living cell.
I think it depends where you come from in the way you think. If you think that we came from one single cell, which is one kind of theory that somehow, and we describe it nicely in the book, how maybe an initial cell was created slowly by very complex systems, but still, and then it was covered by a polymer of lipids, of fat. If you accept that, then don't you agree with me?
All the evidence favors that we came from a single cell, because everybody has the same DNA code, the same proteins, etc. From the simplest bacteria to the most complex, there's a unity to this.
But on the other hand, wait, there's a possibility that we started from some microorganisms, in plural, that arrived here from outer space. And they originated from one cell, or, I mean, that's also a possibility.
And you mentioned this in your book, The Panspermia Theory of Sir Francis Crick and others, but still it doesn't answer the question if there were spores coming from outer space, they still life had to be created in some place in the universe. And one of the wonderful things about your book is that you start out with religion, you start out with ancient myths and stories of creation. But what I want to ask you, when I was reading the book, and I've known you both for, my goodness, I don't know, 50 years or so. When I read the book, and I was a student of Miller's experiments and all of these attempts to recreating the primordial sea, the organic producing atmosphere, where amino acids might be produced by lightning and membranes might be produced by waves and so on. Do you ever have this moment where you say, oh, that's as weird and outlandish as religion?
Absolutely.
It might as well be God.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. When I look at this information and I read this part of the book, I say to myself, well, now I know why my daughter became religious.
I disagree with this.
Eugene, I hope you would disagree. That's the whole fun of it.
Yes, it's testable. Religion is not testable, but these ideas, these hypotheses can be tested. You can't test religion because it's supernatural, and by definition, it's not available to testing.
Gene, but as much as I love you, and I do love you, we cannot go back 3.8 billion years or whatever and reproduce a Stanley Miller experiment.
No, I mean, you can't. You can do the basics. You can do. You can connect two amino acids, and you can create some poly-RNA of 5 nucleotides. But the question is how you jump from there to a cell is the big question. And that's where...
It still remains a mystery.
Yeah, it's a mystery. And when a mystery is there, it's very also difficult, Eugene, to prove it even experimentally. People have been working on it for 100 years.
Yeah, well, of course, the difficulty is that millions of years were involved in the chemical, and you can't reproduce that in the laboratory in a few weeks or a few months or even a few years.
Absolutely. And that's where God comes in to answer the big question.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, I want to take you back. I remember that you started your career studying nucleic acids, and in your milieu were people who helped decipher the genetic code, perhaps the most important findings of the previous century. Did this seed your interest in these questions?
These findings of
Crick and Watson and
about the DNA and the,
And also your advisors and the people that were in your environment when you did graduate work.
It certainly was exciting and interested me. But I also fell in love with bacteria. I was trained as a chemist, and very early on when I started studying microbes, I realized that microbes were the best chemists. And so if you learned about them, you learn about the chemistry. And so I switched from chemistry really to microbiology. And now I switched from microbiology to evolutionary biology. So,
but I must say here that I was slightly younger than Eugene in the crazy 50s and 60s, where all those fantastic times blew up. With the DNA and all these things, and I was fascinated. It was it was like something unbelievable. It was believable, but it was so interesting. It was so fascinating That's one of the reasons. It's not the only one. I knew Hans Krebs, and my days started from Hans Krebs. Yeah.
You knew Hans Krebs.
Yes, I knew him personally, and he took me to the lab
Mhm.
and weighed with me a feather and
Mhm.
showed me how a solution turned from red to blue when you put acid or base. And that was the first stage of my fascination with science.
I was gonna crack a joke and ask you whether he showed you his cycle. Oh, bad joke.
Oh, he
bad
played
joke.
the piano. He played for me the piano.
Wow. And
Yeah.
and you grew up scientifically with Kornberg and the greats of that generation. You were there. But I want to now jump forward. So your book, almost 300 pages, starts out with myths and then scientific hypotheses of how cells came to be. And then a story of the wonderful theory of evolution, Charles Darwin giving credit to his compatriot and colleague Wallace, who is very seldom given credit, and kudos to you for doing that. And your book progresses, but you two have made a very significant contribution to this field, defining the hologenome and doing experiments that show that bacteria can alter the evolution. And yet, two-thirds of the book, you have to go through two-thirds of the book to find the chapter that talks about you guys and your findings, and it's very modest. You could have written a whole book about your contribution to hologenome and to this field.
We wanted to show the evolution of thoughts on evolution. I think it's just as important as knowing what goes on today is to know how it came to be. Because if you want to look to the future, it's good to look to see how things evolve in the past. And there are breakthroughs. It's not just constant plowing, but there are breakthroughs. One of the breakthroughs that led to our discovery was the ability to determine the bacteria inside the body of animals and plants without having to separate them each individually, but as determining the composition by the RNA, the rDNA. And this showed that all animals and plants contain abundant and diverse microbiota. And that changed the thinking, including our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a breakthrough, a technical breakthrough, which led to changing our thinking about evolution.
But we really started before the hologenome concept. We started with Eugene having problems in the lab. Maybe you tell the story about the corals that didn't bleach.
That's a very interesting. We were working on bacteria in corals, and there was one particular bacterium which caused the bleaching of corals in the Mediterranean. And we studied this for 5 years. With my graduate students, we published maybe a dozen papers, a review articles. It was probably the best studied example of a bacterial disease of corals. And then all of a sudden, when we tried to infect it, the corals didn't respond. They didn't get infected, they didn't get bleached, and we were stuck. After all these years, my model system was gone. And the question is, what do you do when that happens?
So we went for walks.
Yeah. You can give up and start all over again. I decided to discuss this with Ilana.
And then I came up.
And Ilana came up with a very interesting idea. Ilana, in addition to being a biochemist and a microbiologist, is a nutritionist. And she came up with the idea of the probiotic. These are beneficial bacteria. And so the idea was that the corals acquired a probiotic, a beneficial bacteria, which inhibited the infection by the pathogen.
Preventing the infection of the pathogen.
And we actually tested this by removing the bacteria from the coral before infecting it with the pathogen. And now it could be infected. So when I lectured on this in one time, someone in the audience said, how in a matter of a few years, most of the bacteria, most of the corals in the Eastern Mediterranean acquire a bacterium? And I said, if you can have an epidemic of pathogens, why can't you have an epidemic of beneficial good bacteria? It probably goes on all the time and we don't notice it. This happened to be the time that we noticed it. And that started us off in thinking about how bacteria can affect evolution.
Yeah.
So this is another way of looking at the immune system. When we look at immunity, we're always looking at our own DNA and our own cells. But you're talking about an immunity that's acquired by microbial communities, which is very
That's
exciting.
right. The corals don't make antibodies. The corals don't have adaptive immunity in the classical sense.
They
No,
do.
but I'm talking about the extension of these results to human beings because we teach, about our immune system, but we exclude the 99% of the DNA of the bacteria. But this brings me to my next question. Most of the studies that I know, probiotic bacteria have a transient effect at best. It's very hard to change the bacteria that you've grown up with. We studied adhesion, all three of us. Bacteria are very good at finding their niche and settling there. Very hard to get rid of them. They're in biofilms. Do you believe that there is a mechanism of therapy, by eating fecal bacteria or whatever? Is this really a technique that has scientific
Now, Eugene,
credentials?
I want to bring us back to what we discussed before, that yes, in simple organisms, you can change things for a long time, and then the change is passed to the next generation. In complex creatures as we are, I believe it is very difficult to change. As you described in the mouth, we believe that they are core bacteria, core strains, or even more correctly, core functions that remain in our body. So when we change, when bacteria come from outside, like with probiotics, they can change things for a short while. I think it is very difficult to change things for a long time. But when you have a disease, you can give do a fecal transplant, and we know there are cases where you can cure. But when you have autistic symptoms, and there are many clinical trials that showed that there are certain symptoms with autistic children that you can change by giving them fecal transplant, but then you have to take these pills. Now it's in the form of pills for a long period of time or even forever, like many other pills that you have to take.
Now, I would say that if the bacteria brings in a new function, which gives an advantage to the organism, it can settle in and spread. An example, the Japanese can digest agar. That's in sushi. Westerners cannot. And the reason is that somewhere in the not too distant past, a Japanese ate agar, seaweed, which had on it a bacteria which can digest agar. It got into his gut. Now, this bacteria cannot grow inside the gut. It's a marine, it grows in the sea. But what happened is its DNA was released and picked up by resident bacteria by a process called horizontal gene transfer. And it acquired these genes, and this gave an advantage to the person who was benefiting from the nutrition of the agar in his diet. And this spread through Japan and to a few other Eastern countries. So that's an example of where the introduction of a bacteria can be established and bring about evolution.
That's fantastic. In the book, and I'm guessing it's more of Ilana's thing, there's a lot of social commentary that you don't find in most biology books. And after all, you could make an argument that there is a kind of a Lamarckism in the way that we pick who we're going to marry and who we're going to have children with. And Ilana, please elaborate. There's so much in the book, just one or two things.
Yeah, first of all, we something that is connected to what you are doing or you were doing, which is smell. I mean, I'm sure we choose our partners to some extent, even a tiny extent, by smell, and the smell is brought about by bacteria. So let's start with that. Then you have the whole question. We give an example of pregnancies that I know, I don't remember the name. You will excuse me. I'm 83 today. So how do you call it? When you have to have a child from another woman.
Surrogacy.
Yeah. When you have surrogacy, the question is, the baby receives the microbiome, the initial microbiome of the surrogate mother. So then what is the question? Now, we are, the medical system is aware of that. And there is a technique where you take the microbiome from the mother, from the, not the surrogate mother, the mother who will receive the baby, and you put it on the baby that's just born, and thereby sort of reduce the effect of the surrogate microbiome. And I think that is, it's much more than a physiological event. It can have many, many psychological and social implications.
Incredible. So what I learned when I was studying similar things is that in Islam, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, if two babies are breastfed
Yeah.
by the same lady,
Yeah.
they're not allowed to marry one another, even if they're not related.
That's very interesting. You know,
I was not aware.
Yeah, we were not aware of that, and that's
very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope it's true. This is based on information.
No, but it's even if it's not true, the idea,
It's interesting.
The mere idea is interesting because they receive a lot of their microbiome from the same mother, from the same woman that breastfeeds them.
You know, this book, it gives so much room for thought. So I wrote a review on it. At the end, I said, well, you know, Eugene and I, we've been friends for 50 years. And in addition to exchanging ideas, we perhaps exchanged DNA and go no. This leads you to the question of, you know, people are married for decades and perhaps they take on each other's hologenome, sharing bacteria, sharing DNA, horizontal transfer. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
And friendship. You know, you talk about cementing friendship. Well, DNA can really cement friendship. What do you guys think?
Yeah, first of all, I want to remark that dogs with time look very much like their owners, or their owners look like the dogs. What about that? But that brings me to the story of one of the theories is that cows became, you know, when they live together, they transfer their microbiome from one to the other, and it really makes them, turns them into a herd. I mean, maybe that is a herd, or the opposite. The herding is a way of transferring the microbiome. You can look at it in two different ways.
Yes, people have argued that kissing is a way of transferring bacteria.
Yeah, I perhaps kissed you on the cheek, Gene. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. But this opens up so many Pandora's boxes. You know, in French, I think when you don't like somebody, you say "je ne peux sentir." I can't smell this person. And as you said, smells are cultural and they're also microbiological. So, peoples may have a certain, beyond the DNA in 23andMe, they might have also certain microbes that live, microorganisms that live, Jewish people might have certain Kiddush microorganisms. I don't know. So these are crazy ideas. What do you think the future holds? You talked about the AI, you talked about social justice. What predict the
I think
future?
as we learn more about the microbiome, the microorganisms inside our body, we'll learn how to control them better. And this can play a very important role in medicine, because we know that microbes play an important role both in causing disease and preventing disease and so forth. So the more we learn about it, the more we'll be able to control it. And the end result will be that good symbiosis is what we're after.
Yeah, but the idea of controlling too much is
regulating.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of controlling too much, Eugene. Only when necessary.
Well, we're gonna end up with GMO humans.
Yeah,
if we
exactly.
regulate too much.
Exactly.
I want to point out by the way, I want to point out to the reader that in writing this book, whenever I said that this demonstrates this, Ilana came back and said, it suggests this.
Thank you, Mel.
Yes, this is a wonderful book. I was delighted to read it and review it. Where did we come from? The origin and evolution of life. The big question. And it's written by Eugene Rosenberg, Professor Eugene Rosenberg, and Dr. Ilana Zilber-Rosenberg, whom I've been fortunate to have as a part of my intellectual biome for 50 years. And who knows?
Maybe also.
What else has rubbed off, literally speaking? It's published by Austin Macauley. It's available on the internet. And for anybody who's interested in these questions of where life came from, how we evolve, and what the future might hold, it's really intriguing reading. It's so well written, you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Any parting thoughts? Any questions that I should have asked you or shouldn't have, but I did?
Thank you. We enjoyed this discussion.
Okay, and yes,
we appreciate very much what you did.
Well, okay, I must say that I'm the big appreciator because as you know, Eugene built my scientific career.
Let me just finish by saying that I'm now going to be 90, as you know, and my daughters gave me a cup, and on the cup it says, the older you get, the better you get, unless you're a banana.
Okay, listen, this has been wonderful. I'm Mel Rosenberg. I'm a host at the New Books Network, and I've departed from my regular children's book niche, and I've gone outside my microbiome, interviewing two wonderful people who have written a wonderful book. So Ilana and Eugene, thank you very much, and we'll see you at Tel Aviv University.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye, Mel.
Bye-bye.